Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Orange First here on the Denver 7 Facebook page. We're on Facebook Live. Orange First brought to you by OtterBox, and I'm bringing to you Woody Paige, everybody. ESPN superstar. You taped the show today, Woody, already?
Legend in my own mind.
Yes, that's what I've heard. Also, Broncos legend. You've covered the team from day one. And a lot of thoughts on yesterday's game, Woody. Troy Renck, our Broncos insider, is at Dove Valley right now. Vance Joseph, the head coach, is holding a press conference about yesterday's loss in Buffalo. So we'll hear from Troy Renck. He will call in live to the show as soon as that press conference is done, and we'll talk more about it then. But, Woody, this team went on the road to Buffalo. And we talked about it last night, and we talked about it all last week about this being a trap game. It was a good team that's tough at home. It was an East Coast time zone. It was an 11 a.m. start, Mountain Time, all these things. And the Broncos said there is no such thing as a trap game. But they fell into the trap and went on the road and got beat yesterday. Got
caged, actually. So they were trapped like a squirrel in the woods. That's exactly what happened. I find it bizarre that Rick Dennison, who was fired here, goes to Buffalo, ends up as the offensive coordinator, and actually puts together a game plan and a process during the course of the game that could not only confuse but confounded and eventually beat the Broncos. 26 points is more than the Broncos normally give up, but 2 interceptions led to that. Fake punt that shouldn't have been called, which I would rant on in regard to that, because here's what happened. They were late getting a player on the field, but the Broncos also left their offensive line intact. Normally, they bring in linebackers and cornerbacks
on the field.
And so Buffalo's there saying, this is not normal. They're doing something strange, and they just stuffed it. I mean, that was a bad call. The officiating was responsible for 2 bad calls, the Emmanuel Sanders catch and also the unsportsmanlike conduct. So there were a lot of bizarre things that happened. But Rick Dennison's got to be the happiest guy in Buffalo today, because being fired by the Broncos and then coming back and actually beating them, I think, there's some sort of grace and revenge in his mind today.
All right, you're watching Orange First, brought to you by OtterBox, right here on the Denver 7 Facebook page. Again, we're going to get out to Troy Renck live in just a few minutes to hear from Vance Joseph. Checking social media, though, Woody. There's so many things, as you said, talking about here. The play that Vance called, well, maybe it was Brock Olivo, who knows. But I saw that Vance Joseph said, yeah, we knew that they knew that it was a fake punt, and we still ran it. We thought we could still pull it off, handing the ball to D'Angelo Henderson and getting stuffed on a 4th and 2. There were some questionable calls by the rookie head coach.
It's a trick play.
A trick play that they knew was a trick, but they still ran it.
It's supposed to be that you're confusing the other team, particularly on the special teams where you do a double reverse. And if you know they know that you're running a double reverse, then it's a good idea to call it off. I think he's protecting his special teams coach. I think he's protecting the entire coaching staff, that they, deep in their own territory, it wasn't a 19, but it was around the 30. And to do that at that point in the game, to try and make something happen, that's a desperate act. And I don't like it. I like the fact that you occasionally try to confuse the other team and do something that they're not expecting. But if they're expecting it, Lionel, don't do it. Call it down. Call a timeout.
Well, you could see the way the Bills played it. They didn't have any gunners. They didn't rush to think it was a punt. They had everybody stacked to the line and just busted through.
Here's what you do, just really quick. The way you do that play is when you have the 2 outside gunners going against your gunner. Then you take 4 guys out of the play, and you have a 9-on-7 situation. And if you've seen something in the film where they back on a play like that, it's supposed to be your aggressiveness in seeing what they do in normal punt situations, and it just was a mistake that turned into really being a devastating play for the Broncos as far as I'm concerned. Not getting ahead in the first quarter. We talked about that last year. To go out against a team when you're not caffeinated, when you really haven't, you're playing at 11 o'clock in the morning. We know the whole deal, but you've gone there on Friday night. That to get 3 points goes back to what we saw last year with Rick Dennison involved in making the coaching decisions here.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, Trevor Siemian, 4 touchdown passes against the Cowboys. He was the NFL FedEx Air Player of the Week. You were listening to people on talk radio talking about giving the guy a new contract right now. people declaring him the franchise quarterback for the next 10 years, and he turns up with a 58.2 passer rating, 2 bad interceptions. The second one was really, really bad. They were driving 1st and 10 at the 24 of Buffalo, down by 7. He throws a terrible pick. So all of a sudden, there's in 1 week, there are chinks in the armor and cracks in the foundation here.
Sure, he goes from being the Air Player of the Year of the week to the Airbnb reject, if you will.
Yeah.
But the other point, in regard to, I heard the talk shows, and I actually wanted to call in, and I don't ever do that.
This is Woody Paige.
Let me give you a
really.
Here's an important piece of information. You cannot tear up a contract until the 3rd year's over for a rookie.
Couldn't do it anyway.
So he's finishing his 3rd year. Let's see how he plays before you suddenly going to offer him $20 million. The other guy on the sideline, maybe they should have given him a contract earlier, but this is much too early in regard to that. Trevor had a quarterback rating that was in the 50s, passer rating. The ESPN quarterback rating was lower than that in the
QBR,
20s. When you go from throwing, as you said, 4 touchdown passes to 0, you throw 10 interceptions as you did the previous week. He's being too careless with the ball. He's making young mistakes that we saw some of last year, and he continues to be, like most young quarterbacks, have problems on the road. With him as the starting quarterback, they're 3-5 going back to last year on the road. And that's about what you should suspect probably out of a guy who was not Deshaun Watson in college. He was a guy who barely played his senior year in college. So he's still learning the game. I like his presence. It's a lot like Peyton Manning. Not making a comparison, other than he learned how to have a presence on the field from Peyton Manning that first year he was here.
All right, you're watching Orange First on the Denver 7 Facebook page, brought to you by OtterBox. And let's go live now, Woody, to Dove Valley and talk to our Broncos insider, Troy Renck. Vance Joseph, Broncos head coach, just finished up his press conference talking about yesterday's game in Buffalo. Troy, welcome to Orange First, buddy. What were some of the major takeaways from what Vance said today?
Well, he spent way more time speaking about the national anthem protest and his views of it and how they would move forward. Interestingly for Vance, again, he said he chose not to take a knee because the way he was raised and grew up and his respect for the American flag and what it stands for. But he also said that he would like to see this issue be separate of football, that politics and sports don't mix, and that while he completely respects the right for his players to have their opinion and their beliefs, that he wishes the platform wasn't prior to the game, but he made no excuses, said it did not impact the way they played. The Bills played better. He did say that the Bills' defensive backs played better than he thought they were capable of. And, Simeon had some poor decisions you guys have talked about. And he did not regret the fake punt. They kept their offensive line in, starting line versus defensive players, defensive back. But Lorenzo Das coming onto the field late kind of cued the Bills in that something was up, but Vance was good about it. He said, hey, I wouldn't change it. We didn't execute it, and because we didn't execute it, it's my fault. The one thing that was interesting, he said, Lionel, in the Von Miller play, he said he looked up the rule today, that he did not see anywhere in the rule where the fake handshake should have been interpreted as essentially a taunting foul. But he said it was called. He respects the rules. Von's a big player for them. It was unfortunate. But it sounded like he will submit it to the league for review just to understand why it was called.
Right. And that's one thing, Woody, Troy, stick with us here, that we talked about last night, is that everybody's laughing about it. It's something you do to your little brother, right? Hey, pull your hand back. Well, and then the referee throws the flag, and you're like, what? And if Vance couldn't find it in the rule book, this was basically that official's interpretation of a rule that, may not even exist.
He's an adult. He's been around the league forever. I'm talking about the referee.
Right.
And you use common sense.
Yes,
that is the rule of life, that if you reach out your hand and I reach out and I go like that, that may be stupid. It may be ridiculous. It may be just, as you said, a kid stunt. But it's not like shoving my hand into your helmet or giving you the business or something like that. And if you were to watch it closely, both of them were kind of laughing about it.
Both Taylor and Vaughn.
The referee made just a horrendous mistake in a situation. The league is trying to bring back some fun. They were in the midst of a weekend when there was a lot of serious stuff going on and surrounding the NFL. I mean, here were guys actually trying to enjoy the day and enjoy the game, and the referee took away from that.
Right, that was a crucial call. Hey, Troy, this is the first time that Vance has had to deal with a loss in the regular season or preseason, right? I mean, so did you sense a little bit of bunker mentality in his answers today, that he was kind of protecting and kind of pushing the media away a little bit when trying to answer some of those questions?
Actually, I found him more forthcoming today than he was in the weeks leading up to the previous 2 games. And that's refreshing. He just said, hey, listen, we didn't execute the things we did well in the first 2 games, like third down conversions, holding them to limited third downs, running the ball more frequently, and creating shorter chain. All those things. He said all the details that produce wins, we did not do well enough. The Bills beat us. The Bills played better. No excuses.
Right.
So I thought he was forthcoming in that regard. You wondered if there was some regret that they didn't rush the ball more, because they actually were pretty effective on the ground with Charles and C.J. Anderson. Anderson, I think, rushed only 8 times.
Yeah.
But, again, he pointed out that the plan, looking at the Bills on film, was to attack their secondary. Their secondary played better than he expected. I did ask him specifically about Justin Simmons, because Simmons, for me, and, again, he's got a huge upside, smart young kid, but he's been wildly inconsistent in coverage for me. He didn't have issue with Justin Simmons in coverage as much as he said he missed 2 key tackles on third down with Shady McCoy.
Right.
But Vance was honest. That's a good spot to be in. I mean, you don't want to be explaining away defeats too often in this league. But he wasn't making any excuses. He wasn't defensive. He basically said, we got to do better. We just didn't play well enough, and he pointed the finger at himself in a couple of cases that he's got to do better.
All right, Troy, last question, and I'll let you go. You got to get into the locker room. The Broncos will have open locker room interviews with their players coming up, and you need to get in there and see what they say today. Any indication at this point, and obviously you haven't gotten in the locker room yet, that the national anthem protest will go on, or was this a one-time deal yesterday?
Well, and I talked to Brandon Marshall about this last night and asked him. He said he just did not know. Part of it is this protest this weekend. Prior to the weekend before, there were roughly 10 players protesting. This past Sunday, there were roughly 250. It was in direct response to President Trump's comments on Friday night in Alabama, using, a decisive term and a vulgar term describing an NFL player. And as Vaughn said, they felt like the league was under attack. And that's what unified the players in this regard. But will it go forward? Vance Joseph indicated he would like the team to kind of have a collective approach, that they were going to try to address it. He did not have the answer right now.
Right.
I know they would prefer, as most football teams and coaches would say, in relates to distractions, to have a unified approach to this, not have 2 people kneeling in half stand. I mean, they would like to have a unified approach, but it may not be possible, because individual opinions on this, as we all know, over the last 24, 48 hours vary.
Yeah. All right, Troy, thanks a lot. We'll see you later today online, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TV at 4, 5, 6, and 10 tonight, talking about the latest from Dove Valley. That's Troy Renck at Dove Valley. All right, he brought up, Woody, that Vance Joseph said he'd like to see a unified team approach to the protest if you're going to keep on doing it. There were some teams yesterday that did. The entire team didn't come out. Steelers, Titans, although Eric Decker said, his wife said today, Eric Decker's wife, Jessie, said that Eric, member of the Titans, did not know that the team was not coming out for the national anthem until the very end, and he didn't agree with that, the entire team approach to not showing up on the field for the national anthem, the Tennessee Titans. But Vance said he'd like to see everybody do the same thing and not have some people standing, some people with their hand on their shoulders, others kneeling, and just kind of not unified. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not really in favor of that. I mean, we're all individuals. If the players want to have a vote and they were unanimous, we're going to stay in the locker room.
But Derek Wolfe is going to stand up. There's no doubt.
Sure, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though they basically all agreed to stay in the locker room, they have a player who did 4 tours in Afghanistan, one of their offensive linemen, who went out and stood up. So I think because we are individuals, even though we're part of a team, you and I are part of a team here at Channel 7, that we have different opinions.
Exactly.
And I think everybody should be allowed to express their opinion. I've been on email and social media today responding to things that I wrote about yesterday, and I'm going to concentrate in a small area. That people say, well, I'm turning away from the NFL. I'm never going to watch it again. I'm going to give up my season tickets. Well, guess what? There's 75,000. Let me deal with it in reality. There's 75,000 people on a waiting list. If you want to give up your season tickets, I'm all for you. Go watch the Aspen turn. Be with your kids. Do something else in life. But guess what? It's not going to prove much because somebody else is going to take your tickets, probably a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, in fact. I watched the game with yesterday. The second point is, everybody talks to me about disrespecting the military. This is not about the military. It's disrespecting what's going on in the country about oppression toward and police brutality toward African Americans. And that's just simplifying as much as I can. It's not, anybody's not against the military like they were during the Vietnam War when I was a young protester. But here's what bothers me. In 50 years of doing this, I've seen over 10,000 sports events, 200 a year, and probably more than that. But people disrespect the flag everywhere. Does anybody stand up at home? Do they play the national anthem before a movie? No. Do they play the national anthem at a Broadway show? Do they play it at charity events you go to? They only do it at sports events. It goes back to Chicago in the 20s where the owner of the team said, I'll play the national anthem on a special Sunday. It was Flag Day or something. And some other team said, oh, we'll do it on Sundays. Then it suddenly became a tradition. Let's do it all the time. Then it became God Bless America after 9/11 because the Yankees did it. That I don't know that it has to be played before every sports event. I don't know that teams have to come out. They didn't used to. They made their decision. College teams and pro teams would usually stay in the locker room. But people are, instead of putting their hand over their heart, there's no laws about it. There are regulations that were recommended by organizations. You're supposed to put your hand over your heart and take your cap off. People don't take their caps off. They don't put their hands over their heart. They got a beer in their hand. They're at the concession stand. They're in the restroom. They're talking. They're shouting out. You know it. You've been in other places. Home of the Braves. In Kansas City, home of the Chiefs, the O's, the Baltimore. I mean, everybody's screaming during hockey games at the Avalanche hockey game. People are not paying attention to the flag. Sure they are, but there's a big percentage of people that get up and go to the bathroom during it. They wander around. They talk behind people. So to put it on one or two guys that have been doing it, do I think it should go on? They made their statement on Sunday. But the team should get together and say, we're going to do this, but we're going to allow this. But the owners kind of got behind it. We didn't hear from John Elway, but we heard Joe Ellis that he respected what the players did yesterday. So I just think that it's another divisive aspect of what's going on in our country, and it scares me about what we're going through. And people should just allow the players to have, it's 2 minutes. It's not a protest going on like marches in Chicago during protests during the National Convention or during the war. It goes on for 2 minutes. And if people want to treat the national anthem of the flag the way they want to, it's okay. You know what? You know how you're supposed to dispose of the flag when you're tired of having it? Burn it. And people don't even know that. That's the way you get rid of it. People go, oh, I've never burned a flag. That's the recommendation. I'm just saying there's so many aspects to this that I don't think people have studied. They just have listened to the President of the United States and following his lead. And he's a guy who's bitter because he couldn't get a team in the National Football League. And that's the truth of the matter.
All right. Well, let's do one more thing, Woody. We're getting a lot of comments on Facebook, on this Facebook Live here about it was a distraction that a lot of the teams, and the Broncos included, may have lost or were distracted by this. But I don't believe that. I believe that once that's over, you get up and you play the game. It had nothing to do with the outcome of the game, in my opinion.
We all have personal problems that have affected in our lives. Oddly enough, you kind of put those aside and you go on with whatever you're doing professionally or personally in your life. That your grandmother died or something, you have to go on with your life. Guess what? The Buffalo Bills kneeled yesterday too. Guess what? They won the game. So was it pick and choose that?
Who was distracted and who wasn't?
I mean, the Buffalo Bills weren't distracted, but the Denver Broncos were. No, it was an action that took place for 2 minutes, and really, people put more into it than I think they really should. I mean, that's a personal opinion. And guess what? To everyone who's written me today or will write me now, you're allowed your personal opinion. What a great country. That's what it's all about, is to have freedom of expression.
All right, Woody Paige has written an article today, a column on thedenverchannel.com about the Broncos' road to the postseason will be grueling and arduous, as was proven on Sunday. The last thing we're going to do, Woody, is talk about the road. I mean, you got to read this article from Woody Paige today, this opinion, but it's going to be rough for this team in many of these road trips. Maybe not the Chargers.
Sure. If you take out the history, and I'll keep this short, if you take out the history of John Elway and Peyton Manning, those are the two most glorious times, briefly with Jake Plummer, but those are the two most glorious times in Broncos history. Except for then, the Broncos are a lousy road team.
Right. Even
during some of the time they were here, the Broncos win about 35 to 40% historically. I went through it. Historically, they win about 35%. Yeah. At home, they are one of the greatest teams in the world.
Yes.
They win more than 66% of their games. We saw it again. They won two opening games. On the road, though, they're like most teams. They have no altitude advantage. They don't have no crowd advantage except when they were playing in San Diego.
Chargers,
maybe this year in L.A.
Probably in L.A., yeah.
But I think people have to realize that they're not going to win. Rare cases with John Elway and with Peyton Manning, they'd win 7 or 8 games on the road. That doesn't happen. They're going to win at best 3. I think they have a chance at winning 2. And it's quite possible they'll only win 1 this year. So they better win 7 or 8 games at home to have a chance at the playoffs, because they're not going into Philadelphia. We've seen Philadelphia. They're not going into Oakland. They're probably not going to go into Miami at the end of the year. They've got these early games. There's 3 of those coming up that are, quote, 11 a.m. body time. So you got those division games that are always difficult. You're playing against teams that are playoff-like teams. Washington played great against the Raiders.
Raiders went into Washington.
You got to go in there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you better grab all the home games you can get and hope you can get 1 or 2 and slide into the playoffs. This is not a great football team. It's a good football team that's got a great defense, but it's an average team otherwise. Special teams, we saw that yesterday, and offensively.
All right, read all about it on the denverchannel.com. Woody Paige, our Denver 7. I'm going to call you an insider. You're an insider?
Intern.
All right, there you go. All right, Woody, thanks so much. Thanks to Troy Renck out at Dove Valley. He's already gone. This has been Orange First on the Denver 7 Facebook page, brought to you by OtterBox. It's Raider Week. Raiders are coming to Mile High next Sunday. Yes, Woody, take care of the otter back there, would you? And then the bye week. So, huge game coming up at home next week. We'll be back next week to talk all about it with Woody Paige and Troy Renck. I'm Lionel Bienvenu. We'll see you next time.
Did you remember that center for the Raiders?